Prison officers say they fear being beheaded by Islamist extremists inside Britain's violent separation units for terrorists. It follows an attack at Franklin Prison, where the bomber Hashem Abedi doused staff in hot oil and then slashed them with homemade blades. It's thought the hate preacher Anjem Choudary is suspected of influencing the attack. Meanwhile, the Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick warns that Islamist gangs are taking over prisons, with 45% of inmates at Whitemoor jail now identifying as Muslim. Let's speak with Sam Samworth, former prison officer and host of the Real Porridge Podcast. Afternoon to you, Sam.
Ian, how are you doing?
Good as gold.
Sad state of affairs, mate. You absolutely got to feel for prison officers everywhere, really, not just at Franklin. For me, it's down to the establishment, this, Ian. There's people who you are not going to rehabilitate. I could probably pick 1,500 people out of the prison system.
Sure.
And we need to warehouse them, mate. We do have solitary, as it were, probably not as strict as America. But you're right, these prisoners need segregating permanently. They're never going to change. They come out of the cell for a shower, maybe a phone call, an hour's exercise, and that's it, mate.
Yeah.
They have limited communication, TV, that sort of things. They're not going to change. They're extremely dangerous. And like I say, people must be living on edge working with these types of people.
And they don't, you know, as I said a second ago, they don't have anything to lose, right? I mean, most of them are lifers, so they ain't coming out. It doesn't matter. They also have their own twisted version of a religion, which, you know, often in their world gives them the green light to do some of what they do. You know, it's all part of their journey.
Yeah, of course, they're going to be forgiven whatever they do.
Yeah.
There's a lot of units in the prison system, small units and that, not necessarily containing terrorists or the like.
Sure.
They're all dangerous. I mean, the thing is right now, I keep going on about this, but nobody is addressing this problem, yeah? There's less prison officers than there's ever been. They're building more prisons, less experience, younger people, more lasses in the female prison estate, you know, inexperienced governors. A lot of governors, it's all about the prisoners, which, you know, depending on your population, is fine. If you've got a nice settled jail and everyone's got a PlayStation, they're all enhanced, all good. Sure. But people like this, you know, they're not getting no facilities. When this guy come out of his cell, for me, if you were managing him, he'd be searched as he came out of his cell, escorted wherever he was going. If he was going for a shower, he'd be locked in. His cell would then be searched, and that's how you would carry out procedures with people of this nature. Yeah. Now, what staff do in prison is they try and make things work, and that's not knocking staff. I used to do it. People do it all the time. You try and make it work. You try and run a regime, but it's dangerous. So let's build a real supermax. Let's pluck the real dangerous ones, and every prison will have them. Every officer will know who they are. Put them in a supermax, like in America. If they come out of the cell, they're on their own, locked in places, etc. But the Muslim thing, you know, people are talking about it now. 25 years ago this was happening. 20 years ago in strange ways, a lad from Salford said to me, I've got 10 years, Mr. Samworth. I can't fight him. I can't spend it down to segregation. I'm just doing what I need to do to survive.
Wow. So there was, and that, as distinct from any other religion, Sam, that was happening, right? There seemed to be a sort of cartel of Islamic prisoners that sort of wielded this kind of influence and power.
Listen, let me tell you, yeah. So I worked 2 prisons, private and public sector. The imams, for me, were terrified, absolutely terrified. So when we used to do chapel, we'd have Sunday chapel, they'd have the Catholic service, etc. Everyone would go along, nice and quiet, like you'd expect if you went to the church on the outside. Muslim prayers. The vast majority, and this is important, Ian, will be there to pray. You get a minority who will be playing up, refuse searches from female staff and the like, you know, extreme views, as it were. So that's important. That all these Muslims in prison are not extreme, they're not people of hate, and they don't want to be part of anything. However, there's a lot of peer pressure. And that is important to say.
Yeah.
So anyone who's radical, you know, extreme, and like I say, every prison will know these people. Let's warehouse them.
Somebody like Anjem Choudary that we mentioned, I've interviewed this character before, a couple of times actually, and he said some very sinister things to me about, you know, I was talking to him about the Taliban. It's relevant to what we're talking about here, Sam. And, you know, this business of some of the ways that the Taliban have decided to execute people, you know, not with a bullet, but, you know, setting them on fire, throwing them off a building, you know, the worst. And he defended this. He defended this because sometimes you have to have a glorious sort of, you know, almost a dramatic kind of death. It's the right thing to do. You score greater house points with God, all this kind of nonsense he came out with. If somebody like that is in jail, they should be kept away from anybody, right?
Correct. Correct. But again, you have to look to the establishment. I mean, what's coming from the establishment, whether that's the prison service or Parliament or whatever, is maybe providing stab vests.
Yeah.
What is that going to do? You know, if that's all you've got to come up with, then for me, if you want a solution, the first thing you do is you employ a lot more staff. But they're struggling to employ people and retain them now. So they need proper recruitment, and we need to get some decent numbers on landings. Not everywhere. Special units and the like, you need to be mob-handed. You know, if you've got this guy coming out, I want 6 staff there. He's on his own on a landing, going to the shower and that. And like I said, they're treated, for want of a better thing, like Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah. Well, you're right, but there's probably no will, politically or otherwise. And as you say, there's some sort of slightly touchy-feely governors that wouldn't go near that, right?
Correct. Of course it is. It's all about the prisoners and their rights.
Yeah.
The other problem, Ian, is, again, I feel for the officers, and I mean that. I can't even imagine what it's like, mate. There's no amount of money on earth would make me go back into that job. But imagine turning up at Franklin or any other dispersal prison, knowing that's happened. Yeah. You've got young people. The families aren't going to want them in the job. You know, there's people with mortgages and that. People will be turning up, spending half an hour in car park, terrified, you know, maybe vomiting. I've seen that before, before going into work. It's wrong, mate. It's very wrong.
It is wrong. And the solution is there. But does anyone want to take that leap? Listen, Sam, great to have you on. Thank you. Sam Samworth, former prison officer. He's the host of the Real Porridge Podcast.